Your history class taught you about Pearl Harbor, D-Day, and Hitler's rise to power. But they left out the most important part, the money. World War II wasn't caused by ideology or evil alone. It was caused by the biggest financial catastrophe in modern history, a disaster that took 20 years to unfold and made war the only option left. Every major event that led to World War II was a financial crisis first, and a political crisis second. Hitler rose because German money became worthless. Japan invaded because their economy was collapsing. Britain and France appeased Hitler because they were broke. Here's the story your teacher never told you. The story begins in 1919 at the Palace of Versailles. World War I has just ended, and the victors are deciding Germany's fate. The number they wrote down would kill 70 million people, 132 billion gold marks in reparations. In today's money, that's roughly $500 billion. But here's the problem. That number was mathematically impossible. British economist John Maynard Keynes was at Versailles. He calculated what Germany could actually pay, maybe 10 to 15 billion marks. He wrote an entire book warning that these reparations would destroy Germany and destabilize Europe. Nobody listened. France wanted revenge. Britain wanted money. To pay reparations, Germany needed to export goods, earn foreign currency, and make payments. But the same countries demanding payment had erected trade barriers to protect their own industries. Germany was told to earn money through trade while being prevented from trading. It was like demanding someone pay you by getting a job, then refusing to hire them. Germany tried anyway. They made payments by printing German marks, using them to buy foreign currency, then paying reparations. This is where everything broke. Watch these numbers carefully. In January 1919, the exchange rate was 9 marks to $1. By January 1922, it was 191 marks to the dollar. Economists were worried but thought it could be controlled. Then everything exploded. By January 1923, 17,000 marks to the dollar. By July 1923, 350,000 marks to the dollar. By November 1923, 4 trillion marks to the dollar. The currency didn't just decline, it ceased to exist as meaningful money. Imagine you're a middle-class family in Berlin. You've saved your whole life, been responsible, done everything right. Then overnight, your life savings can't buy a loaf of bread. Your pension that should last 20 years is worth less than a postage stamp. Workers got paid twice a day because morning wages were worthless by afternoon. Restaurants changed menu prices during meals. People carried money in wheelbarrows. There's a famous story of a woman who left her wheelbarrow of cash outside a store. When she returned, the money was still there. Someone had stolen the wheelbarrow. It was worth more than millions of marks. The hyperinflation destroyed Germany's middle class completely. Teachers, doctors, engineers, shopkeepers, everyone who makes society function, suddenly poor. Everything they'd worked for gone. When Germany finally stopped the hyperinflation in November 1923 by introducing a new currency, the damage was permanent. An entire generation learned that money was a lie, that savings were worthless, that the government couldn't be trusted. This is what your history teacher never explained. Hyperinflation destroyed the social class that supports democracy. The moderate center disappeared. People who'd been reasonable became radical. Why trust democratic institutions when those institutions presided over your financial destruction? For a few years in the mid-1920s, things seemed better. This recovery was built on a scheme called the Dawes Plan. Here's how it worked. American banks lent massive amounts to Germany. Germany used that money to rebuild and pay reparations to France and Britain. France and Britain used the reparations to pay war debts to America. American banks made interest on everything. It was a circular flow of money that only worked if American banks kept lending to Germany. Everyone knew this, but they pretended it could last forever. It lasted until October 1929. When the American stock market crashed, American banks lost billions. They stopped lending to Germany and demanded their existing loans back immediately. German businesses couldn't pay and started failing. Unemployment exploded. In 1929, German unemployment was 1.3 million. By 1932, it was over 6 million. For young men aged 25 to 30, unemployment was over 40%. Now watch what happens politically. In May 1928, before the Depression, the Nazi Party got 2.6% of the vote. Irrelevant. In September 1930, after the Depression started, 18.3%, second largest party overnight. In July 1932, 37.3%, the largest party in Germany. Hitler didn't seize power. He was given power by a desperate establishment that thought they could control him. And why were they desperate? Economics. Nothing else had worked. Here's the disturbing truth. Hitler did fix the economy. Within 5 years, unemployment went from 6 million to basically zero. That's not propaganda, it really happened. From the perspective of ordinary Germans who'd been jobless for years, Hitler performed an economic miracle. But this miracle was built on 4 things: theft, lies, slavery, and war. First, theft. The Nazi government systematically stole from Jewish families and businesses. Over $100 billion in today's money, just from German Jews initially. Those autobahns Hitler built, partly paid for with stolen Jewish wealth. Second, lies. The Nazis created a fake company called Mefo that issued bills the government used to pay for rearmament. These didn't appear in the official budget, so Germany's spending looked responsible while they were secretly arming for war. By 1938, there were 12 billion marks of hidden government debt. Third, slavery. Forced labor programs, concentration camp prisoners, foreign workers brought from conquered territories. Eventually, over 12 million slaves working in Germany. Fourth, war. This is the most important part. Hitler's entire system only worked if Germany kept expanding and conquering. All that government spending created massive debts. The stolen wealth would run out. The system needed constant injections of new resources that could only come from conquering other countries. Hitler's Germany was like someone who took out a huge loan to start a business that doesn't actually make money. Eventually the loan comes due, and you can't pay. You have 2 choices: admit failure or rob someone to make the payment. Hitler chose robbery. This is why Germany couldn't stop after early successes. The system required conquest. Stopping meant economic collapse. Germany wasn't alone. Japan faced a fundamental problem. They were industrialized but had no natural resources. No oil, no iron, no rubber. The Depression destroyed international trade, so Japan couldn't sell goods to earn money to buy resources. Their solution? Build an empire and take resources by force. Pearl Harbor wasn't about honor, it was about oil. America had cut off exports, and Japan's strategic reserve would last maybe 18 months. Britain and France pursued appeasement not because their leaders were cowards, but because they couldn't afford to fight. Both countries were still recovering from World War I debts. The Depression hit them hard. They needed time to rebuild their militaries, time they bought by giving Hitler what he wanted. The Soviet Union knew war was coming and spent the 1930s building industrial capacity regardless of cost. Millions died in famines, but Stalin was preparing. When war finally came, every country faced the same question: how do you pay for it? Germany looted occupied territories systematically. Every country they conquered, steal the gold, impose tribute payments, take factory production, use slave labor. By 1944, Germany was getting 40% of military spending from occupied territories. Britain borrowed through war bonds, and from America through Lend-Lease. By 1940, Britain was almost out of money. Lend-Lease saved them, but put them deep in debt to America. America ran enormous deficits, going from $40 billion in debt before the war to over $250 billion after. But American industrial capacity was so massive they could absorb it. By 1944, America was producing 96,000 planes per year. Here's the terrifying truth: World War II could have been prevented with better economic policy. If Versailles had imposed reasonable reparations instead of impossible ones. If countries had cooperated during the Depression instead of competing. If governments had understood how to manage economies. John Maynard Keynes predicted this in 1919. He warned the Treaty of Versailles would lead to economic catastrophe and another war. He was right. Millions died because nobody listened in time. After the war, the world built a new system specifically to prevent another depression and another world war. The IMF, the World Bank, the Bretton Woods system, the European Union, all designed to create economic ties so strong that war becomes unthinkable. But here's the scary part: we're forgetting these lessons. Income inequality is rising like the 1920s. International cooperation is weakening. Trade wars are starting again. populist leaders are winning by blaming foreigners for economic problems. The same patterns that led to World War II are appearing again. Economic stability isn't just about prosperity. It's about preventing catastrophe. When enough people become economically desperate, when the system stops working for them, they'll tear it down. They'll support extremists, not because they're bad people, but because they're desperate people. And desperate people make desperate choices. The path from Versailles to Auschwitz was a financial path as much as a political one. Economic disaster created the conditions that made Hitler possible, made war inevitable, made genocide thinkable. 70 million people died teaching us these lessons. Small financial decisions cascaded into global catastrophe. We're making similar financial decisions right now about trade, currency, cooperation, inequality. These decisions seem technical and boring, but they matter more than almost anything else. Because when the economic system breaks down, everything else breaks down too. Your history teacher should have taught you this. The guns and tanks were just tools. The real causes were in the financial system, in failed economic policies, in the breakdown of international cooperation. Understanding this isn't just about history. It's about recognizing the warning signs before it's too late.